Thanks for watching. Go ahead and click the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified of each new video as it comes out. Hey everybody, I'm JJ Johnson. You're watching Reality Survival, and today we're in a different location than we normally are in the house, but we've got some stuff going on downstairs, so I thought I'd just bang this out up here. So the other day we put out a video talking about red flag laws, boogaloo, it's time to get to work. I think that was the title of the video. And in that video I basically talked about a couple of things. One of them is kind of how to approach red flag law situations and supporting people who are being victimized by red flag laws. And also that, the central point of it was that the right, the constitutional right is not very far down the continuum of being prepared to fight a violent insurgency. Okay, and the reason I was talking about that was because on social media after this whole Whiskey Warrior 556 thing, there was a lot of rhetoric talking about how it's time to, basically, start violence against the government and stuff. All right, and I think that's silly because I don't think that we have done the things that we need to do on the right to be able to morally and legitimately say we've done everything that we could first before we resorted to violence. And so in today's video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to show you how the left is closer to an insurgency than the right in the United States. Okay. This was actually, I didn't actually even intend on coming up with this subject. It was basically as I was doing some more research into insurgencies and all that kind of thing. As I was reading through some of the stages of disillusion that lead to violence and the development of an insurgency and everything like that, it hit me. I was like, dang, like, the left is way further down this continuum than the right is. And so we'll talk about that. But the four things that we're going to cover here real quick, and this is going to be a longer video, so if you think I talk too slow or something, you might want to, speed up the video by hitting the little wheel down there and then put it on 1.5 or 2 or something. And if you've got something to do, if you only got a couple minutes, there's no way you're going to get through this video, so maybe just watch it later. We're going to talk about the factors that contribute to insurgencies. We're going to talk about the components of an insurgency. We're going to talk about the stages of disillusion that lead to violence within the development of an insurgency. And then we're going to talk about how to know when an insurgency is morally justified. And it should be noted, that there are differences between insurgents, belligerents, revolutionaries. There are technical differences between those, and so we're talking today about insurgencies. All right, and that is what seems to be the most likely outcome of some sort of eruption of violence in the United States with regard to a change in the political governance that we have. It's possible that we could be looking at a legitimate revolution where legitimate actors are involved and those kinds of things, but that's going to be more geared towards state actions and all those kinds of things, and so today anyway we're just going to talk about insurgencies. We could get into the differences of all these things if you wanted to, but anyhow, so the first thing we're going to go into here is factors that contribute to insurgencies. There are primarily 5 key factors that contribute to insurgencies. The first one is the perception of poverty, people's perception of relative deprivation, which is seen as a failure to meet economic expectations or not being able to keep up with your peer groups. i.e. high unemployment, especially when combined with a youth bulge in birth rates. So as we're going through this, try to equate the things that we're talking about to today's society in America right here and now. Okay. The next one is number 2 is legitimacy of the government in the eyes of the populace. Okay. I.e. the populace believes that their leaders are elected fraudulently through corrupt means. All right. Marginalization. Number 3 is marginalization or persecution of ethnic or religious groups. And this is one of the stronger factors for predicting violence. Number 4 is a desensitization to violence, i.e. individuals have either previously seen violence or have convinced themselves that violence is the only option. And, this is primarily talking about war-torn countries, And then number 5, the presence of criminal enterprises that can be used to fund insurgencies, because insurgencies cost money. Diamonds, drugs, oil, prostitution, etc. Okay, so all this stuff I needed to mention here. All this stuff comes from, or the majority of the material that I'm presenting to you today is coming from a study done by the Special Operations Command, the Army's Special Operations Command, that is entitled "Assessing Revolutionary and Insurgent Strategies: Human Factor Considerations of Underground Insurgencies." And so I'll link to that below so you guys can see the whole thing. It's a very long thing. I'm essentially taking some information that they have in there, and I am presenting it and basically trying to make it user-friendly for YouTube so that we can explain it and stuff. That's a very long and in-depth document. But I think these factors that we're going to talk about here are the key things. So when we look at these factors that contribute to insurgencies, and we look at them from the view of the right, and we look at them from the view of the left, I think it's interesting. You can see why the left is so upset with Donald Trump and all that kind of stuff, and then you can take a look at it and see from the right why the right is so upset with the liberals who are trying to persecute them through religious persecution and fundamental rights and those kinds of things. So that's the first section of this. These 5 things in some way, shape, or form are usually present whenever there is the development of an insurgency. Okay? That's what this study is kind of trying to present to us. All right, so the next thing is that we'll look at the components of an insurgency. Now, insurgencies can be understood as having 4 primary components: the underground, the auxiliary, the armed component, and the public component. So we'll go through each one of these real quick. And the underground is a clandestine organization established to operate in areas denied to the armed or public components, or that conduct operations not suitable for the armed or public components. The next one is armed component. So that is the visible element of a revolutionary movement organized to perform overt armed military and paramilitary operations using guerrilla, asymmetric, or conventional tactics. Okay. So the third one is auxiliary. This is the support element of the irregular organization and operations which are clandestine in nature and whose members do not openly indicate their sympathy or involvement with the irregular movement. Members of the auxiliary are more likely to be occasional participants of the insurgency with other full-time occupations. The last one is the public component, the overt political component of an insurgent or revolutionary movement. Most all successful insurgencies pursue military or political strategies. Okay, so that's basically saying that these 4 spheres engage in a dynamic and evolving relationship that changes in response to both internal and external factors. Many of these spheres often overlap in varying ways throughout the duration of the conflict. Okay, so when we look at the right, we look at the political right, or the conservatives in this country. I think it's fair to say that we have a pretty well-developed and large armed component, right? But the underground component, the political or public component, and those are probably undersized to a large degree. And that was kind of what I was commenting on this video that I talked about the other day, is we haven't done what we need to politically. And then when you look at the left, in terms of the development of an insurgency on the left, I think it's their smallest component is probably the armed component, but the underground, the auxiliary, and the public components are both pretty vast, So, and we have recently seen a lot of talk and social media posts and different things about that, about leftist groups getting armed and all those kinds of things. So, okay. So that's all just kind of laying the groundwork for this section here, which is talking about the stages of dissolution that lead to violence within the development of an insurgency. And that's kind of the title that I've given this. All right, so I'm going to start off with one. I'm going to go through 22 items. As we move through these lists, higher and higher on the list, we're going from basic just dissatisfaction to to basically how we're higher on the list, where we're talking about large scale military operations. Okay, so it's kind of taking a wide swath and bringing it down, however you want to look at it. All right, so number one is dissatisfaction with political, economic, or social administration, or other conditions such as national aspiration or desire for ideological changes. All right, I think we could probably easily say that both the right and the left, have met that. Lots of people are dissatisfied. Number two is the creation of atmosphere or wider discontent through propaganda, lies, and political efforts to discredit the government, police, and military authorities. All right, so you might have some of that on the right, on the very far right, extremes. But I'd say that the left has a lot of that, a lot of propaganda, lies, and political efforts, and that kind of thing. I mean, that's all we've seen for the last couple of years, right? So that there's no question that stage is met for the left. Number three is character assassination, attempting or assassination. So on this one, I've adopted the doctrine was talking about actual political assassination, and I am adopting for this discussion that to character assassination, just so that if you look at the reference, you'll see the difference here. Attempting to sway public opinion by creating a distrust of established institutions. I think that's a plainly open goal of the left right now, right? Have we seen that within the right? Maybe. Maybe in the fake news effort, or something along those lines, to say that the mainstream media, it should not be trusted. You might be able to make that argument. I'm trying to be objective on both of these, although I do think that the mainstream media is fake news largely. So, all right, number four is increased agitation, unrest, and disaffection. You may see slowdowns and strikes. You might have infiltration of national administration, think education, police, and military. There's been some generals and stuff like that supposedly have been, kind of co-opted by Obama. Supposedly there were stories about that. Has the right done much of this? I don't know. I'm not sure that we could say that we've done, that we're too far down this list on this one. Maybe maybe to a certain degree, we do have a lot of, of right-thinking or constitutionalist people in the police and military, but I don't really see them sowing unrest and disaffection and all that kind of stuff. But number 5, infiltration of foreign agents, agitators, foreign propaganda, material, money, weapons, and equipment. Okay, with regard to money and infiltration of foreign agents, agitators, foreign propaganda material, I mean, the left has this one pegged, right? Russia, Russia, Russia. That's all we've heard for the last couple of years. Ukraine, now, I mean, this is, so, but has the right done anything in this one on the side of it? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that I've seen a lot of that. Maybe, but I'm just still not sure that I've seen it. Okay, number 6, recruitment of like-minded individuals and others, indoctrination and the use of these recruits for organized purposes such as protests, etc. I mean, the left has been great at forming, recruiting members and getting them to, go out and protest and all these kind of jazz, right? The right has not been very successful at this. A little bit. We've seen some of it, but to a much smaller degree than the left, I think. Number 7 is penetration into professional, social, and political organizations and into all parts of society. Well, I mean, I think the left really has this one pegged, right? Because that's all we hear about is all the leftist nonsense, and we see schools and organizations and city administrations changing policies and placating, these people and all that kind of stuff. So I don't see a ton of that with the right. Not entirely. I mean, just not a whole lot. I don't know. Number 8 is spreading subversive organizations into all sectors of life in a country or region. I mean, I think we have a lot of subversive organizations on the left. Media Matters, you look at some of the stuff that they've done. Obviously, Black Lives Matter, Antifa. I mean, there's lots of these different leftist groups that have been basically trying to sow discord and be subversive to the culture, I think. Okay, let's see here. Number 9 is establishment of formalized resistance elements, appeals to extraterritorial support, infrastructure. So establishment of formalized resistance elements, appeals to extraterritorial support and infrastructure. When I think of this, I think of the UN, the United Nations, and European countries, those kinds of things. I think the left has a lot better handle on that than the right, and I'm not convinced that the right has done anything in that one, really. Number 10 is the expansion of coordination amongst resistance networks. I think it's fair to say that we do see coordination between different groups, and stuff like that on the left. I don't think we see any of that on the right. Number 11 is intensification or propaganda, increase in disaffection, and psychological preparation for revolt. I.e., is the way that I look at this one, is the dehumanization of the enemy. Which side do you think that's happening on? I think it's happening a little bit on both sides, probably. But, they're most certainly, with the whole Nazi rhetoric and all that kind of stuff, and the fascists and everything like that, that is probably more hard-hitting on the left, in my opinion. Okay, number 12 is overt and covert pressures against government, strikes, riots, civil disorder. Okay, the left has that purely. The right hasn't done anything really of this nature. Maybe you could say the Malheur thing and the Bundy Ranch, there's been a little bit of civil disorder, but there's been far more riots and stuff like that on the right. Okay. far more riots and stuff on the left. I think did I say the right? Anyway, okay. Number 13 is sabotage and terror to demonstrate the weakness of government. I haven't seen any of that on the right. I think we have seen some of that. We started to see some of that with the attack on the ICE facility and stuff like that. A while back there was an attempted attack on the Pentagon even by a leftist. So, we've seen some of that. Number 14 is increased underground activities to demonstrate weakness of the government. And this one I'm thinking, hacking, cyber attacks, espionage, leaking documents from within the government, stuff like that. We're seeing a lot of that stuff. A lot of leaks and all that jazz. WikiLeaks, those websites and everything. Okay. Number 15, an intense sapping of morale of the government, administration, police, and military. Yeah, I mean, look at the left's effort to portray police as racists and killers and all those kinds of things. You don't see that very much from the right. There are some on the right, the far right, that can't stand the government at all and all that kind of stuff that maybe have some of that rhetoric, but by and large, that's a pretty common theme on the left, I think. Number 16, negotiations with government representatives. Do you think it could be possible that these, these investigations and this impeachment and all that kind of stuff could be efforts to make negotiations behind the scenes? Fairly certain it could be. Number 17 is increased political violence, terror, and sabotage. Luckily, we have not seen a lot of that from either side yet, but we're in a continuum here, right? And so that is something that we may be getting close to seeing. And the question here is who's further along in this continuum? Well, I think the left is significantly further along in the continuum. It's more likely to me that we're going to see more political violence, terror, and sabotage on the left than it is that we're going to see that from the right, personally. That's what I think. All right, number 18 is shadow governance. Deep state. Shadow governance activities is number 18. And I would say that you could definitely say that we're seeing a lot of that in the government. And it appears to be more oriented towards the left than the right. That's not to say that there aren't political figures on the right who aren't involved in these things, because there most certainly probably are. But it seems like the preponderance of those things are more towards the left. Okay, number 19 is minor military and paramilitary actions. Number 20 is large-scale military and paramilitary actions. Number 21 is international strategic communications. And number 22 is negotiated settlement of dispute. Okay, so to me, when I go down that list, it's just, it's blatantly apparent that a larger portion of the left is much further down this continuum. They're probably up there close to 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there. They've gone through a lot of different steps, right, in the development of their insurgency. Whereas the right, primarily, for the most part, there are some exceptions over there that we talked about, but they might be at number 1 to 4, or maybe a few outliers on the far extremes that are down to 7 or 8, but for the most part, they really haven't traveled down the continuum the way that the left has. And so it is for that reason that I think it's more likely that we're going to see a violent insurgency coming from the left than it is that we'll see it coming from the right. To me, it seems more likely that the right would be in a position to defend themselves from the attacks that they're, could potentially be receiving from the left in the future. Okay. So I'd be curious to see what you guys think about this, but it struck me as pretty clear that it almost is like somebody's intentionally following this checklist. Like, I'm not a conspiracy kind of guy, but when you go through and you read these, you're kind of like, wow, check that box, so it's interesting. Now, here's the next thing I want to talk about. The last part of this is how to know when an insurgency is morally justified. Okay. Got to give credit where credit is due. Hibernian's son is the one that I first heard talk about this. I'm not a Catholic, and so I had never seen this before, but it matches exactly this thought processes and the steps that I personally take in my mind when I'm thinking about these things. And so this is from, he talked about this in a recent video. If you guys are not subscribed to Hibernian Son's channel, you should be. I think that, he's one of the few YouTube channels that I watch pretty regular when he puts videos out. He doesn't do it on a real consistent basis. But I would say that he's one of the thought leaders in this community. I think that he is a pretty squared away guy. He's pretty well read. He seems like an intelligent dude. So I don't want to take credit for this, but so he was talking about in his other video how to know when an insurgency is morally justified, and he referenced paragraph 2243 of the Catholic Catechism, and what that says is that an armed resistance to oppression by political authority is not legitimate unless all the following conditions are met. So then he goes at number 1 is there is certain grave and prolonged violation of fundamental rights. Okay. So from the perspective, we're going left and right, like we have been. From the perspective of the left, they are a grievance culture. They're a victim culture. And I think they could definitely say that their fundamental rights, have been, from their mindset, let's just make sure that we're saying that, that have been trampled on. And the right can also say that probably, with the Bill of Rights and the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, and, free speech and all those kinds of things. Can we say that there's prolonged violation of fundamental rights? Yes, probably on both sides we can say that. All right, number 2, all other means of redress have been exhausted. So on the left, as we just looked, through this kind of continuum, their perception from their point of view is probably that they've gone through more of these things, they've done a lot of these things, and they've been more politically involved, they've organized groups that, and so they may feel as though everything's been exhausted, right? The left is great at community organizing and protesting and civil disorder and getting out there and putting out their, their thoughts and feelings on issues and getting policy changed. Right? They've been pretty successful at it in a lot of ways. So from the right, have all other means of redress been exhausted? I just don't think we can say that. I don't think we can say that at all. We haven't seen large scale efforts, well-organized efforts to make political changes. There have been in some areas specifically. There's been successes on state levels in some of these areas, and there's been positive changes made. For example, in Virginia, almost 20 counties have basically declared themselves, Second Amendment sanctuaries. Multiple states have made big successes in pro-life abortion rights and saying that babies, even in the womb have rights. We've had multiple states that have declared themselves to be constitutional carry states, things like that. So there has been some progress on the right as well, but I just don't think that we've seen all other means of redress exhausted on the right, personally. All right, number 3 is such resistance will not provoke worse disorders. Okay. So the left is putting forth this mantra that that it's an illegitimate president, that the people that support him are Nazis, they're racists, they're fascists, and just bitter clingers to their guns and all that kind of thing. So to them, from their perspective, they're looking at us saying, they're the majority, they're not minorities, because the left likes to break everything down into minority groups, and so they feel more victimized by this big majority that is supposedly trampling their rights or whatever. But on the right, from our perspective, being that largely speaking we're far more rational in the way that we approach things, would such resistance provoke worse disorders? Would life be worse for us now than it would be if we started an insurgency? Most rational people on the right are going to say no. That life would be much worse during an insurgency or a civil conflict, civil war, or something along those lines. I don't think we're there as a group yet, and agreeing that it will not provoke worse disorders. Okay, number 4 is there is well-founded hope of success. So, for the left, being that they have seen some moderate degrees of success, they've seen socialism now be accepted by a large majority of young people in the country. Could they conceivably think that they're on the verge of success? Yeah. Even a lot of people on the right think that Donald Trump will be the last Republican president. So yeah, I think they would see that they have a path to success. Whereas on the right, do we think that there's a well-founded hope for success? Yeah, I'd say they probably do, primarily because they have the largest armed component within this, right? They're lacking in other areas of components, but it's nearly a certainty that the right would win in a right-left kind of conflict. So they may think that they have that one covered. Number 5 is it's impossible reasonably to foresee any better solution. So I think on the left, they probably would not see, or they even though they're moving through this continuum, right, they've had significant amounts of success going through this one. So I'm not sure if where they would fall on this one. For the right, is it possible to see a reasonably better solution? I think it is, right? Because we haven't done all the political steps. So is it reasonable to think that if we did these political steps that we would have better results? To me, that seems reasonable. If we were more politically engaged, if we were more politically active, if we did more demonstrations, talked to more of our local leaders, ran for political office, contributed more money to political office, did more lobbying, and all those kinds of things, would we be more successful? Well, yeah, probably. It's going to probably be a better solution than going to war, right? Or starting violence. So that is kind of just, just throwing that out there as food for thought for you guys to think about when you're thinking about the topics of insurgencies and whether or not the right or the left is actually going to do something. Okay, I don't think that the right is there. I really don't. For all the reasons that we talked about. I don't think we've moved through this continuum enough. I don't think we've done all the steps that we need to psychologically get most people on the right, in the right headspace, to say, yes, it's necessary. Violence is necessary. I think most rational people understand that it's not necessary and that we have a lot of work to do left. However, when you look at the left side of this, I could see how the left could get to the point where the overwhelming consensus is in the right headspace to think that violence is the next step. Because, and I say that only because they've moved through, more of these steps on that continuum. So, anyhow, this is really just food for thought. I think that it's a pretty good argument to say that the left is closer to an insurgency than the right is. But I'll be looking forward to what you guys think, in the comments down below. And hey, I have started importing videos to Gunstreamer. You guys can head over there to subscribe to that channel if you want. I am doing my best to move away from liberal social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. I have a profile on minds.com. I also have a profile on MeWe and then Gunstreamer as well. So I'm hoping that you guys will also want to get away from the liberal, nonsense, because the more we use these platforms, the more we're supporting, their ideology through, our presence here on the platforms. If we can move to other platforms, I think we will be a lot better off. So, would love to see you guys over there if you can get over there. Anyhow, let's just see what you think in the comments. Tell me why I'm wrong, I guess, or right, or whatever. Talk to you guys later.